My name is Shirley Condon and I'm the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bradford. Today we are talking about how open recruitment can support levelling up. Levelling up is the fifth of the 14th Levelling Up goals developed by the Purpose Coalition. We all know the UK is not an equal society. Where you grow up can have a profound impact on the rest of your life and your future economic success. In those areas with the highest social mobility, disadvantaged individuals can earn more than twice as much as their counterparts who live in areas of the lowest social mobility. These differences are not acceptable. Many things that should not impact our future economic success do, including gender, race, parental wealth, and where we live. Education can have a significant impact on improving life chances, but inequalities persist even for those who have participated in higher education. The longitudinal educational outcomes data shows that on average males earn over 14% more than females, and those who receive free school meals, for example, earn on average 7% less than those who did not. These inequalities have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is why the Levelling Up agenda is so important. The fifth Levelling Up goal, open recruitment, is central to increasing social mobility. It is vital that professional and managerial jobs are open to people from all backgrounds. Open and transparent recruitment processes must be accessible and inclusive, and to be successful must be part of a whole organisational approach to equality, diversity and inclusion. Not only is this fair to individuals, it can have a profound impact on the success of business. The McKinsey report Diversity Wins, How Inclusion Matters shows that the most diverse companies outperform the less diverse companies on profitability. The University of Bradford has a long-standing commitment and impact in equality, diversity and inclusion. In August 2019, we reaffirmed and strengthened our resolve to build upon our inclusion maturity by focusing and refocusing our values and mission. Our vision is a world of inclusion and equality of opportunity, where people want to and can make a difference. We want to be known as the place to be to make that difference. It is vital that we improve the terms on which individuals and groups take part in society, improving their ability, opportunity and dignity of those disadvantaged based on the basis of their identity. We have put in place several fundamental requirements for success. A strategy that has equality, diversity and inclusion as its core component. Strong, value-led, visible leadership. A framework that tackles the structural issues that create inequalities, rather than focusing our efforts on individual adjustments. Acceptance that addressing long-standing and complex structural inequalities is challenging and requires long-term commitment and investment. And finally, an intersectional approach to all aspects of our business. Our success in increasing the numbers of students from disadvantaged and diverse backgrounds and supporting them to obtain graduate level jobs is evidenced by being placed first in the English University Social Mobility Index and being named University of the Year by the Times and the Sunday Times in 2020. 59.8% of Bradford students come from financially disadvantaged backgrounds, and over 70% of these are Black, Asian and minority ethnicity. 90% of our students were employed or in further study 15 months after graduation. And in the most recent graduate outcomes survey, 75% of Bradford graduates were in highly skilled roles, with the majority of these staying in the Bradford region. We have achieved this through a whole system approach to equality, diversity and inclusion, and working across our region with partners who share our vision and values, taking an open approach to recruitment to ensure the success of their businesses. Open recruitment has been at the heart of this approach in the Bradford region, and combined with the other Levelling Up goals is fundamental to making our country fairer for everyone and enabling us all to learn from the rich diversity of our society.
My name is Alex Fleming and I am the Regional President for Northern Europe at the Adecco Group. The Adecco Group is the world's leading talent advisory and solutions company. Our business is all about people and opportunity. The coalition has produced 14 goals that set out the architecture for what levelling up really means. And I'm delighted to be involved in this important conversation about driving levelling up Goal 5, which is open recruitment. Levelling up recruitment will make careers and professions open to people of all backgrounds through transparent, accessible and open hiring practices. We are proud to work with like-minded businesses, universities, policymakers and civil society in this coalition. Working together is critical in driving the levelling up agenda and to driving national post-pandemic recovery.
Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of seminars on levelling up. Today we're going to take the theme of open recruitment. Delighted to have the University of Bradford involved in our webinar as well. There's all sorts of different issues to do with how people are recruited to jobs, I think, which really play into the whole theme of levelling up goals. Before I get Justine Greening to have a word, because of course Justine was the creator of the Social Mobility Pledge, the driving voice behind levelling up goals, let me just introduce our panel to the people who are going to hopefully keep us all entertained over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. Well, as I mentioned, Justine Greening, former Secretary of State for Education, is with us. Professor Shirley Congdon, who's Vice Chancellor at the University of Bradford. Alex Fleming is Regional President of Northern Europe for Adecco. Robbie Moore is Conservative MP for Keighley and Ilkley in West Yorkshire. And Steve Kelly is the Principal of Keighley College in West Yorkshire. Mike Hawes is the Diversity, Inclusion and Wellbeing Specialist at Morrison's. And Alim Bashir graduated in Economics with the University of Bradford in 2015. And he is now a technical support specialist working for the Prometheus Group. I'm sure he'll explain exactly what that means in just a moment. Justine, let me come to you first. We're talking about open recruitment over the course of the next 45 minutes. Just explain what that means and how important it is to the levelling up agenda.
Well, I guess the backdrop to this is that we often talk about talent being spread evenly, but opportunity not. We obviously invest £40+ billion a year just in England's primary and secondary schools. But the big challenge is also how we make sure that people coming out of our education system can then actually connect up with those opportunities that are there that our country has. And that's where open recruitment really matters hugely, making sure that the opportunities that are there are genuinely open to people coming into the workplace. But also, we know that diversity really matters in businesses. So more than ever before, we now understand that actually the best companies are the ones that don't just have the same people. They have a range of different people from different backgrounds, different attitudes, and that's how they take better decisions. But also in a modern Britain, it's sort of what people expect. They expect businesses to be representative of the communities that they're working in. So there's a business imperative for this as well as a levelling up imperative. I think the final thing to say about recruitment is there's a huge amount of innovation out there as well. There are challenges. There are all sorts of reasons why maybe sometimes people feel an opportunity that's there isn't for them or someone like them, or maybe they look at the process and the hoops they've got to jump through and just think that's all too much. But actually, there are a lot of businesses. It'll be really interesting to hear from Alex and Adecco Group and Morrison's who are thinking through how they get over those challenges. And there are solutions out there. And I think we've got a brilliant panel today of people who are part of the education system, like Steve and Shirley Congdon at the University of Bradford, who are really on the front end of making sure our talent pipeline gets developed. But then also people like Alim, who, you know, very directly been through an experience with the University of Bradford. And then, of course, hearing from, you know, Mike at Morrison's, Alex from Adecco Group, who are really on the employer side of making sure you get to that wider talent pipeline. And then, of course, Robbie Moore, who leads on the levelling up goals in Parliament for us, but also represents a very mixed community in his own neck of the woods up in West Yorkshire, and can speak very directly about almost the barriers maybe that are there sometimes for people that get in the way of them getting those opportunities and using their potential. So this is a really important levelling up goal, and we've got a perfect panel, I think, to talk about the issues around it.
I love this phrase, talent pipeline. I haven't come across that before, but you kind of know what it means just by hearing it, don't you? Do you think that open recruitment is just another way of saying equal opportunities recruitment, or does it go more wide than that?
I think it's wider than that, because I think it's about people having a sense that opportunities are open to them. So, for example, there'll be some young people who would never dream of applying to a city law firm because they just would think it's a different world entirely. Other times, I think it's about recognizing that there are very practical challenges. Certainly when I went for my interviews at PricewaterhouseCoopers, it was probably one of the first times I'd walked into a very big, shiny office, and it did feel a bit intimidating. At the same time, there's fantastic employers like Morrison's. My first ever job was a Saturday job at Morrison's. It's sort of where I really learned to turn up on time and work in a team. And I think sometimes we miss the fact that those sorts of experiences massively develop young people. So sometimes having open recruitment isn't just that first career job you're going for. It's actually about what happens as you develop as a young person before that can shape whether you feel opportunities are really open to you. So there's a lot of different aspects, and I hope we can get into some of them during this seminar.
Well, Shirley Collington, let's come to you, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bradford. Now, you lead the leadership team there. How important is recruitment policy in what you do? Because obviously, as effectively the chief executive of the organisation, you've got a lot of conflicting demands on your time. How much time do you spend trying to make sure that your recruitment policies are as open as possible?
Well, it's of fundamental importance to us from the perspective of recruiting students and recruiting staff, obviously. So, a lot of attention is given these days to the attainment gap and to graduate employment and graduate salaries and graduate progression. And a lot of people talk about, it's the Social Mobility Fund actually talked about the long shadow of deprivation. So even those people who have a higher education qualification are still are in this shadow of deprivation, because a lot of this matters in terms of where you live and your gender and your parental wealth all contribute to the things that Justine's talking about in terms of it not being equal opportunity and not being levelling up. So even a degree doesn't cancel everything out. So it's really important for us, if we want to support that pipeline that you're talking about to get into jobs such as being the CEO of Morrison's, or in a position that Justine and Robbie are in and myself are in, we've got to make sure that people can progress with other things, not just a degree. And so that matters for our staff as well, because we want a staff base that is diverse. Better businesses are more diverse. It's been demonstrable for many years. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how we can open up our recruitment to students and staff more all of the time. It's got to be a whole system approach.
Alex Fleming, you joined Adecco in 1997, so you will have seen very different developments in the whole processes of recruitment. Just explain what Adecco is, first of all, and what have been these developments over the last, nearly quarter of a century. Now, I don't want you to feel old when I say that, obviously.
Feel old now already. So the Adecco Group is a workforce solutions and talent solutions organisation, and it spans from all sectors, from office, blue collar, white collar, office, industrial recruitment, right through to executive recruitment, outplacement, outsourcing, all areas, finding talent solutions for organisations. And in terms of sort of how things have changed, I think what I see is that the recruitment sector now is really starting to level up, but there are still many, many areas where more progress can be made, and especially in the context of social mobility. And I think, if you look at some of the examples, last year, just 84 of the 1,000 or so director positions in the FTSE 100 were held by a business leader from an ethnic minority. And, this is the causes of poor social mobility. They're deep-rooted and complex, as we know, But it doesn't mean that employers are powerless to act. And in fact, they can do much more than they think, not least by ensuring that their recruitment processes don't continue to perpetuate low application rates for people from less privileged and minority backgrounds. But also, I think that we do a lot of work with our clients because we're in a unique position in Adecco where we're supporting both candidates who are finding jobs and also our clients who are looking for new employees. So I think it's our role to help to educate and support people to understand those opportunities. And we've observed some great best practices from employers who are really doing good things in that talent outreach space. For example, being much more data-driven, so using data to really understand recruitment patterns and progression within work for people from different backgrounds, and then showcasing this internally and externally, and it helps to attract that talent because people need to see it's possible in order to apply in the first place. That's what helps people see that it really is possible. But I still think there is much more that can be done in terms of levelling this up.
Robbie Moore, looking at this from a political point of view, it's quite interesting, I think, in that I think political parties, all of them actually, have made real efforts to open up their recruitment processes, whether it's for people to stand for local councils or to be MPs. And you look at the proportion of women that are now MPs compared to what it was even in 1997. You look at the proportion of ethnic minorities that are now MPs, still not quite there, but huge progress. You could argue that gay people in Parliament are actually overrepresented now, if you really want to. Has politics got something to teach business here? I mean, we heard that awful statistic from Alex there about the number of people from ethnic minorities who are at the top of FTSE 100 companies. Has politics got something to teach business?
Well, I think you've correctly identified some of the positive changes that have happened in Parliament over the last few general elections, where we've seen the changes, positive changes in the makeup of Parliament and the diversity in all manner of respects that's brought. And that's great because that's what democracy is all about. It's about having people that are representing all walks of life, all different communities, all different backgrounds. And that leads to very good decisions being made. And that's exactly what needs to happen in a business environment as well, isn't it? When you have a full range of thought coming into making some key decisions at the top of the ladder, inevitably those decisions are more rounded and more based on what hopefully a business is wanting to achieve, whether it's in terms of outreach with a product or a service that they're wanting to produce. So, but of course, there's always more work that can be done in Westminster, absolutely, and of course more work that can be done, as you've identified as well, in a business setting.
Isn't the main lesson that it has to come from the top? If the chief executive or chairwoman of the company isn't on board with this agenda, nothing is likely to happen. And that the reason that it's happened in politics is because you've had political leaders, and I would say David Cameron was probably, certainly on the Conservative side, the best example of this, somebody who right from the start said, I want to have getting towards a 50-50 proportion of men and women as candidates. And he formed or helped, or he supported the organisation Women to Win in achieving that goal. Now, and I'm sure, I mean, Shirley probably has got a view on this as well. If you as the leader of the organisation don't set the ground rules, don't be surprised if nobody actually adheres to the agenda.
And I absolutely think that it's leadership at the top that makes that massive difference. And there's a saying which I think is fantastic, and it's culture will eat strategy for breakfast any day. And it is up to the leadership team in any organisation, political, business, or any type of environment, to set that culture, because you can have the right strategy in place, the best strategy possible. But unless you've got the right culture that is driving that strategy will never come to fruition.
Shirley, just have a little word on that, if you would. In your organisation, I think maybe have you got some examples of where you personally have noticed something that maybe wasn't quite right in the recruitment process, and you've had to drive it from the top?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced lots of things that I don't think are quite right in many roles I've occupied. And I think what you've got to do is you've got to speak out. But I think the important thing for leadership is it has to be able to be confident enough to recognise there's a problem. And if the leaders cannot recognise that there is a problem, then they're not going to get anywhere with their leadership team. And some people have previously not liked to say, yeah, structural inequalities do exist, racism does exist, and we have to be able to acknowledge it. And I think that those organisations that do well at levelling up will be those organisations who are open, transparent, and acknowledge where there are problems.
Steve Kelly, you're principal of Keighley College. One of the words which we've talked about a lot in these seminars over the past couple of months is aspiration. And have you found in the students that you deal with on a day-to-day basis that it's not just maybe structures within private sector companies, within public sector organizations, it's actually the thought among students that, oh, well, I'll never get a chance to do that. People like me won't get the chance, and therefore they maybe sometimes settle for second best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of our taglines at Keighley College is high aspiration, high support. So what we're recognizing is that the young people and people of all ages actually who come to the college and use the college need that aspiration, and they need to see and have a vision for themselves. And the high support needs to come alongside that as well. And some of the issues that we've already been talking about needs a real investment in support. People having mentors, people having just someone they can go and talk to and form relationships and groups with. But certainly aspirations for young people, particularly in the time we're in at the moment, perhaps they don't see that. So widening experiences for young people. So, traineeships, apprenticeships, the Kickstart program, really welcoming young people into business so they can see what it's like, spend a day with the CEO and just raise that aspiration is absolutely crucial. And for us at Keighley, we're at the heart of our community. That's what we say we are, but we need to be at the heart of our business community as well, and working alongside businesses, and businesses working with us to shape our curriculum, but also providing that aspiration and that vision.
Aleem, I'm really interested in your story because you graduated from the University of Bradford in 2015. I'll just pick up one or two of the themes that we've discussed so far and what impact maybe they had on your thoughts before you graduated and what you wanted your career to look like. Did you find did you feel that there would be barriers to you, and what's been your experience?
So I grew up in Girlington and Manningham, so that's one of the most deprived areas of Bradford. So when we were growing up, when you look around you, you see the crime, you see the drugs, you see the sort of the gang life, and you really can get sucked into that. So it's very important for you to have sort of a straight and narrow sort of a sketch of how you want your life to be. I was lucky that my father actually had a degree. So there was an expectation that since my father's got a degree, I need to get a degree. So when I, went to school, there was always that push from behind from my family to, do well in your education and you'll get a good job. Don't be like the people around you. Don't be the people that are, on the streets. They've got nothing to do, so they get involved in crime. So, I was, very determined to do well. Throughout school, I found certain subjects that I did well in. For example, maths. I used to love maths. I used to love numbers, and that's something that sort of pushed me towards economics and graduating. And one thing that really opened my eyes was attending a university like Bradford that had so many different cultures, so many different backgrounds. I think when I was elected in the union there, we figured there was over 100 different nationalities at Bradford, and that really showed the different types of cultures that we have. And when you looked at how much the societies were and the sportsmen were achieving, this was down to the fact that we had such a diverse range of people that were involved in our societies and in our sports clubs. And when I looked around me, I thought, where do I see my career going? And I was determined to get onto a graduate scheme. And I was lucky enough to get onto an IT graduate scheme, although I didn't graduate in IT. So I did my initial training in business analysis, but I ended up working in IT service management. But I was lucky enough to work for the Department for Work and Pensions initially after my graduate scheme, and I worked there for 2.5 years. I travelled to Manchester. Some people don't travel outside of Bradford. A lot of people that I grew up with, they're like, oh no, we're from Bradford, we want a job in Bradford. But it was different for me because my father had been traveling to Halifax, and I know it's not very far, but that thing inside me that, oh no, you have to travel to get a good job. I always had that inside me that my father has got a fairly decent job because he's traveled outside, so I need to do that as well. So traveling, I was working in Manchester city centre, so it was an hour and a half commute. Waking up 2.5 hours before I started work to make sure I got ready, got onto the train. Even mentally it was so draining, but in the back of my mind it was I want to have a good career, I want to have a good foundation, and this later on led me to the role that I'm in now, which is a technical support specialist, working with small, medium and large manufacturing companies across the world. Some are chemical engineering companies, some are in the renewable sector, and some are oil refineries, and different manufacturing companies where we provide them with preventative maintenance software, and I'm providing technical support to them. And this is only possible because of the drive that I had initially, and that push that I had from my father and my parents, that you need to get a good education, and that was instilled in me from a young age. If you want to get out of this sort of this area, this way of life, you have to get a good education, and that's what pushed me. And I think that all the steps throughout my journey that I've had came from having sort of experienced the different cultures. And even in the company that I'm in now, majority of our staff speak 2 or 3 different languages. It can be quite daunting working here, but it's something which I've really got on board with, and I think that's part and parcel of why I've been as successful as I've been so far.
There's one phrase that came to my mind when I was listening to you there, and that's role model. And how old are you? What, 25, 26?
I'm 27.
27. Well, it's quite something to be a role model at 27. I mean, do you kind of feel a bit of a responsibility to go out and actually, maybe go into schools and explain?
Yeah. I mean,
I came from your background. This is what I've done. It is possible.
Yeah. No, this is very important. And for the past sort of 10 years, I've worked in many different madrasas, and I've in my local mosque, I do lead prayer there as well. And being that role model for the youngsters is so important and so vital. I've worked with students that are from very low socioeconomic backgrounds. When the pandemic hit, you talked about how the access to knowledge is not there. We had students where we were telling them, you need to come online onto Zoom, and they were like, oh, I'm sorry, but I don't have a laptop. I don't have a phone. Yeah. How do you want me to get online? And we were like, oh, okay. Now we need to remodel this and think about how we can have some of the students in the mosque, in the madrasa, and some of them not. And when the government guidelines allowed that, it really gave us a sigh of relief, because we were able to give sort of the madrasa classes that access to that knowledge to the students again. Whereas when there was a full lockdown, we saw that half our numbers decreased because they couldn't access that. And it's I'm sure the schools face the same predicament.
Aleem, you're the kind of guest, if I had you on my radio show for a sort of 5-minute slot, we'd end up talking for half an hour.
Yeah.
So I think we'd better let the rest of the panel in. Mike Hawes, I think you've got a really interesting job title, Diversity and Inclusion and Wellbeing Specialist at Morrison's. Just explain what that involves.
Yeah, so it's a really wide-ranging role, and to be fair to Morrison's journey in D&I is fairly in its infancy, and so this role was created in 2019 purely to add weight and depth and breadth to our approach to diversity inclusion. So it's grown into sort of a subject matter expert role. And a lot of that expertise, if you like, has come from listening to colleagues and customers from diverse backgrounds, and that helps our team, I suppose, advise and guide the business and the relevant business areas and business teams make decisions and strategize in a way that makes diversity inclusion a reality in our business. Is probably a fair summary.
And which section of the management team do you belong in? Human resources, presumably.
Yeah, so in our business, it sits under employee relations. So employee relations, policy, culture, and diversity, inclusion, and wellbeing is sort of wrapped into one under human resources. Yeah.
And given that it's quite a new department, position, have you had difficulties in convincing the senior management of the worth of this in a way? I mean, obviously they set it up, but often when there's a new group of people within a bigger structure, that it takes sometimes some convincing for other colleagues to get on board.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I'd say when we started, the term I was used was as a curious intention. So there was an intention to do much more and do better. And with that curiosity to see where it takes you. And I think the beautiful thing and the one good thing and something I'm really proud of is we've never really had to bring in that business case. And I know most D&I sort of specialists, and when you work in that world, and the same with sort of social mobility, there's always a business case. Unfortunately, our business leaders, whilst they're behind the scenes, that's really important. The fact that it's the right thing to do and that acknowledgement that there's more to do, and Morrison's being where it is and it's based in Bradford, and actually when you take a step back and you really look at the opportunity that we had at the start, to diversify our teams and sort of give back more locally, but take more locally, take from the local communities to strengthen our pipelines. That didn't take much convincing as soon as you really sort of highlighted the need for it and sort of showed the numbers as they were in terms of where we were lacking, to be honest. Yeah.
Given your HQ is there, how many people work in the main headquarters building, and how many people do you employ in the stores all around the country?
So the headquarters building was sort of circa 2,000. So in terms of COVID now, it's still 2,000 base, but only about 1,500 go in. And in terms of our business, we've got stores, but we also own manufacturing and our logistics business as well. So we're vertically integrated. So at the height of the pandemic, we were up to sort of 140,000 colleagues all in, and we're now sort of at 125,000. Sort of off the back of it. So.
And do you have to approach different sections of the company in different ways? Because obviously you've got the 2,000 management people in the headquarters, you've got managers in the stores, but then you've got all the people who work in the stores, and then also the people who work in the other parts of the business. Do you have to have different approaches, or is it a company-wide approach?
So it's a bit of a matrix approach. So as a core business, we create strategy, but then it's for the sort of divisional leaders to implement that strategy. So a manufacturing business and a retail business are so different that to sit under the Morrison's name, you do need different approaches. So for just the way that it's run in general, it's the same from the diversity, inclusion, and the recruitment processes as well. So they're built from the same nucleus, if you like, but they're just slightly different paces, slightly different breadth, that we would sort of have to take the approach out in different business areas.
Now, you've all had your opening say. If you bear in mind there are 7 people on the panel, I'd be very happy if you'd like to sort of engage with other panelists, but if you do, could just raise your hand to say that you want to intervene. I'll bring you in, otherwise it gets a bit of a free-for-all. Let's concentrate on maybe one thing that you can think of, each of you, which needs to be done to help the levelling up agenda in terms of open recruitment. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing, what would it be? Alex Fleming, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think to me, it's truly championing talent, no matter what background they come from. It's always been a real passion of mine. People are a huge passion, and unlocking that real potential of each individual. And I think opportunities need to be there for everyone to develop and grow, not just to be recruited, but also to feel they have a level playing field when they're within the organization, that they can progress and develop within that company. And I think a lot of what's been said is very true around providing that mentorship within the organization to help people, and maybe buddying up mentors and mentees from different backgrounds, because I think there's that dichotomy of thought is really beneficial to both parties within that organization. Both will learn from one another. And I think that exposure helps people to see the real benefit of having people from different backgrounds and experiences working together for creativity and to really build energy and to have much, much better productivity in your teams. And I think that's proven time and time again in organizations. So really championing not just bringing a diverse group of people into the organization, but then really following that through and ensuring they get the same opportunities for development and growth as anyone else does, and through a mentorship is always really successful.
Robbie Moore.
For me, Ian, it's all about raising aspiration right at that very early stage. Okay, so and one big thing that I'm really working hard on here in my constituency and across West Yorkshire is getting that connectivity between the education provider and the businesses as close as it can be, because I time and time again are getting when I'm going out and meeting young people, they're saying to me, "Oh, I'd love to do this, but it's not for me, and I don't think I can get there." And I'm trying to install that, of course you can get there. You know, anything is available, any opportunity is available for you if you really want to go for it. And therefore, if I was waving a magic wand in, it would be making sure that that connectivity between business and the education providers is as close as it can be, but also from a policy perspective, here in Westminster, I really want the education department to be saying, actually, from a funding perspective, we need to be making sure that any T levels or vocational courses are equally given weight from a funding perspective as anyone that wants to go down the university route as well.
Okay, Shirley.
Yeah, so I think to shorten the shadow of deprivation and to level up, we've really got to have a whole system approach to this. We need system-wide leadership, and something that connects us together. So we recognise that to get people into university and onto the board level, we need to start off with the first 1,000 years, the first 1,000 days of life. And that means we've got to work together. And I think something like the levelling up goals can provide a framework where we can all work to something together. So I think for me, it's systems, leadership, and working at the intersections.
Mike?
Yeah, I think there's a two-pronged approach. That one thing for me that I think is really important is reframing of what's meritable. Businesses are really, they talk a lot about meritocracy, but merit is determined by the people in power. And for a lot of processes in terms of to come out of education and join businesses, a lot of those processes are based on opportunity and experience. So for those that haven't had the opportunity to gain experience, they then can't quite gain the merit that's needed to get through and join the business. So not quite sure what that reframing is, but a focus on potential and an investment in your business's onboarding programs will enable us to take on rawer talent, less polished talent, and actually invest in that. And I think that would be a key difference for businesses.
Okay, Aleem.
I think for me, it's the opportunity to good education. And I think it's the word opportunity to good education is the key here, not just education, because there's a point of just, sending people to school and expecting them to leave with, a certain number of GCSEs, a certain number of A-levels. But quite frankly, the way I've seen the world, it doesn't work like that. And it's about getting that good quality education that's suited to you. Growing up, when we were in school, we used to look down upon the BTECs, for example, rather than, we were really pushed by the teachers to go do A-levels. But the reality was that some of us should have really done the BTECs, and then we would have got better grades, we would have had better opportunity, and we would have been in those sort of fields where we could excel further. I know a lot of sort of gas engineers and sort of electricians that did do the BTEC courses that are, a lot more successful than those people who got degrees, because they've got degrees and they've ended up in, very low-level jobs, customer service and, sort of call center style jobs. But they've got, like accounting degrees where, they were expecting to be at, PwC, KPMG, some of the large accounting firms, but they've ended up, being somewhere where they didn't really need a degree to get into that role. So I think having the opportunity to having a good education is the foundation block, and there needs to be investment in that. And there needs to be investment in a diverse range of education that meets the growing needs of the rising population.
I could see Steve nodding away to everything you were saying there. Steve, this is old canard, which, I mean, I've been doing radio shows on this for 10 years, this whole conflict between academic and vocational training. And I think Alim is absolutely right about people don't really value vocational education as much as they should. And yet we constantly have debates about it, but nothing ever seems to change.
Yeah. It's really interesting that colleagues around the screen here are saying a lot of things I would have said. But for me, it's absolutely that investment in world-class skills to make sure that we have that aspiration for young people. So BTECs, A-levels, T-levels, as long as young people have that aspiration, the chance to do it is the most important thing for me. And investment in the different education sectors is crucial. And we talking a lot here about, 16 to 18-year-olds or young people in schools, but it's also the investment in the adult education budget to ensure people who are retraining or unfortunately coming out of COVID and maybe they've lost their current role or their current job, to ensure that there's investment into that side of education as well. Because for me, that whole levelling up agenda is when families have jobs or have aspiration, and Alim's talked about it absolutely wonderfully, then that's when the confidence is there for people to try new things. And definitely absolutely agree with Robbie and Shirley, that working in partnership with universities for us as an FE college and working with employers, is so crucial. And we do need funding and investment to do that. And then the last point when I'm talking about investment is investing in the infrastructure. So there is a digital divide, in the areas that we work in. When lockdown came, nearly 70% of my students didn't have either access to a computer or there was only one computer in the household, or wasn't connectivity. We gave every laptop we had out into the community so those learners could still continue to study, but that we still have that divide of technology and good quality equipment in FE so we can help the next phase in people's vocational careers.
Justine, would you like to just sort of sum up what you've heard from everybody else and maybe throw in a few of your own experiences and what's the one thing you would like to see change to help open recruitment truly succeed?
Yeah, I think people have made some brilliant points. They're exactly the right ones around changing attitudes, making sure there's genuine choice in the education system. So choice and quality. So you can follow the route that works for you, but not have to feel like you're going down a lower quality route because you perhaps have a particular interest compared to other people. I think the other point I would make is about changing the perceptions of employers to rethink what high potential looks like. And for those that are still stuck maybe in an old school world of where it is just all about academics, them revisiting that to understand that actually the people who are successful, it's around the strengths they have. Probably one of the most, if I've been interviewing Alim, one of the most important things he actually said was, to me anyway, that told me about who he was the fact that he was prepared to do a 3-hour commute every day for a job that was going to, and a career that was going to connect him up with opportunity and give him development. That showed a level of commitment from my perspective that was hugely important for any employer to know, probably more than most of what else was going to be on his CV in a way. And I think there are lots of employers shifting towards a more strengths-based approach to looking at talent. And I think that's really important because actually what they're going to find is that often this concept of disadvantage, which is real, but actually a lot of people who are coming from maybe tougher backgrounds are hugely learning on that journey. And what they're learning is a lot of resilience. It's about how to get over problems. It's about not being put off by setbacks. That's a lot of what my background taught me. And that's massively valuable when you get into your career. And so I think it's about employers having a more rounded view of not, if you like, just extending opportunity because it's a good thing to do, but actually realizing that wider talent pool is huge talent for them to tap into and will probably be where they find the stars of the future. One other point, Ian, data. Yep. Alex talked about data. Data is crucial. I think we have a real a real challenge with feeling uncomfortable tracking and talking about class and background. But actually, if we're really going to shift the dial on this, we just need to find some measures and then track them so that we can check if we're moving in the right direction, and not be quite so worried about it, because actually different people have different perspectives. It's a good thing, but you probably do need to check if you're a business as to whether you're really getting that diversity that you want to. So just kind of moving on the debate on that and data, I think, is also important.
And just on that, do you all think that we have a real problem in recruitment, that we all tend to just, and I don't think this is deliberate necessarily, but we tend to recruit people like us, in that because that's what we feel comfortable with. We know people like us, and therefore you tend to subliminally recruit people like you, without unless you make a deliberate effort not to. I mean, I've tried to do that all my career. And on my radio show, I always want my producers to have left of centre politics, because they can challenge me. And I think if you challenge, you probably produce a better result. But I wonder, throughout business, throughout the public sector, whether people on interview panels, just as a natural human thing, tend to gravitate towards people like them. Do you think, I mean, what are the ways of combating that, if you think that is a major problem? Alex, you're in the recruitment business. Let's start with you again.
So I think, yeah, undoubtedly it does happen, but I think it takes a level of confidence to step out of your comfort zone, to recruit somebody from a different background, and to see where your strengths are, but understand where your weaknesses or areas of development are. And I always say, you know, the more experienced you get, the more you need to recruit to your weakness, so that your team is rounded.
Absolutely.
You have a team of people around you who are good at different things, and it's okay to not be, even if you're the more senior colleague, it's okay to not have the answers to everything. So I think it's getting comfortable with people around you being more experienced and knowing things that you don't, and that makes for a far, far more effective, more profitable organization, without a doubt. So I think it's about choosing unbiased ways of recruiting in order to, and changing up the way you recruit to exploit different opportunities of talent, and then being comfortable with being uncomfortable, not knowing the answer to something.
This whole idea of blind CVs, do you think that is something that can really help open up the whole recruitment process, where people don't put necessarily their real name, they don't put what sex they are? It's a much more fair process. Do any of you think that is a thing that everybody should be adopting? I mean, I noticed the Spectator magazine were adopting this for their intern programs. I think they were really worried that they just kept recruiting Sloane Rangers. And so they've opened it up now. And one of their most successful interns was a woman over 50, who then went on to get a career in journalism as a result of doing that. Shelley, what do you think? When you're recruiting at the university, do you use blind CVs at all?
We don't currently, but we are moving towards an approach like that, because it definitely happens. We tend to recruit, most people do tend to recruit people that are like them. And just by doing that doesn't solve it as well. You've got to be thinking about what Aline said. You need to be creating diversity every step of the way, so that we're used to difference, not just used to it, but we leverage it and we welcome it and we value it and we see it as a positive thing. So unless we can get and it goes back to what Robbie said about culture, we've got to value it. We must value difference, otherwise we're just going to continue with, as you said, with same thinking, we'll get no thought diversity going. So yeah, I think we should be doing many different things.
And Mike, this must be on your agenda at Morrison's, I guess.
Yeah, so I personally sit on the fence a bit in terms of the blind CV conversation. As a business, it's something that we've looked at along with most businesses. And I think the trick to it is about timing. So for us, we're very much at that point of trying to be very proactive in diversifying our shortlists and diversifying our panels as well. And the point about data, again, if we were to use blind CVs and those types of things, it'd make it very difficult to vet our own processes. And we had some recent examples for our early careers intakes where we were able to sort of identify the steps in that process where candidates from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic background were disproportionately dropping out. So for us, as long as the commitment's there, and everyone in the process is driven towards the fairer outcome, then I think it's important that we're able to still see some of the data that we need. So I think when the timing is right, I think it's a good thing. But for some businesses, I think it's important to be able to vet that data and identify the patterns that are there already before taking on the unconscious bias training and then the blind CV.
And that's an interesting point. And I just wonder how we measure success in this area. I mean, in 5 years' time, how would we work out whether various changes had actually led to an improvement in the situation? Steve, I don't know if that's something that you can throw any light on.
Yeah, actually, Keighley College is part of a larger education group. We're called the Illuminate Education Group, which has colleges, schools, primary schools, the music conservatoire within our whole group. And we've brought together different members of the group to particularly look at this. So we have a mentoring scheme at the moment where people have volunteered to be mentors and people have volunteered to be mentees. And it's one of the most illuminating experiences that I've taken part in, because you learn so much from the person that you're mentoring as that type of conversation. And interestingly, in talking about interviews, we actually have our students interview our future colleagues as well as the managers in the organisation.
That way lies madness, Steve.
But it's very, very interesting, because when you go through what we call a welcome day at Keighley College, we have many different views on the candidate, and the candidate also can ask questions along the way and find out more about the culture of the place rather than about the job that they're being interviewed for. And quite often, you're quite right in, some of our students have a different opinion to the panel and to whatever other activity that happens, but all views are weighted equally. And the feedback we get is that actually people enjoy the student bit the most. So
it's more dangerous, isn't it?
You have to take a risk sometimes.
I'm just trying to think, Robbie, how we could translate that into the political world. It's probably best not to think too hard about that. What do you think about how you can sort of measure whether progress is being made? Is it simply that every few years we need to get a survey done of, I mean, it's quite easy to do, I suppose, if you think about different minority groups being employed in different sectors, but it goes a lot deeper than that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think, well, before being a member of Parliament for Keighley, you know, I was from a business background. And one of the things that I always said to myself, which I learned from my initial boss, actually, I was a rural surveyor before entering Parliament, was if you're recruiting and you're wanting to recruit for a specific role or a specific job, always recruit someone that's going to be far better at that job than what you are, because it enables you to have more freedom and be more efficient at other things that you're good at. And I think it's always quite difficult to set out with a strategy to recruit someone that's going to be better at the job than you are, and tell your team to be open to that sort of view as well. Because and I've always, even recruiting for people in my office here in Parliament, I've always actually done a blind CV type role when we've been recruiting, and then I've actually done a 3-tier approach and got my team members to get involved in the interview process as well, because at the end of the day, it's all about a team effort, a team response. Yes, I'm the member of Parliament and maybe set the direction, but it's very much a team game. And I think, coming on to the point about measurables in terms of efficiency, in terms of decision making, I think it's good that when you set that clear strategy at the start about how you're wanting to recruit for a specific role and the measurables that you're wanting to deliver from that, to cross-check it as a team as you're working through, it is always healthy to do. You know, are we on track as a team for reaching those deliverables, and almost have 360 feedback. Obviously it happens to me whenever there's an election, but actually internally as a team, you know, am I on track as the recruiter, and do I think they're on track in doing what I want to get done?
I mean, in theory, what you say is absolutely right, but can you really expect people to try to recruit people better than them. I mean, the natural human reaction would be to see them as a threat. It's like saying to Jurgen Klopp saying to Mo Salah, I want to buy a new striker that's better than you. Who'd you like to suggest?
And it was always something that I found really difficult to get my head around, actually. I remember that my first boss saying to me when we both sat together in an interview panel, and it was the best thing that I had to get over, because I certainly learned that as soon as I almost let my reins free, you know, it lifted that challenge factor, that heavy weight on my shoulders, that actually once you change your mindset that you're recruiting someone that's going to be better at a particular role than you are, it frees you up as an individual to concentrate on things that you're then good at. And yes, it's a different mindset, but it's the right one in my view for efficiency.
Aleem, how would you like to see recruitment processes changed?
Well, I am a fan of the blind CVs. It really makes you focus on the skills, and it makes you focus on the individual rather than those things that might cause you to have a bias towards them. So I do think having blind CVs and removing personal information from recruitment processes is key. But I think once that individual is in the job, there needs to be a clear direction of how they're going to progress and checkpoints to make sure that they're getting the equal opportunity compared to others. Because I've seen in sort of the working life that people from particular backgrounds know the sort of office and know the office politics better than others, and because of that, they're able to, I would say, reach better opportunities than others. With myself, if I'm stuck on something and something's going wrong in the office, I'll speak to somebody who I think may have a similar experience from a professional background. Now, others may not have that, and that can cause issues. That can cause people to have what I would say not the same level playing field, and therefore what you're going to get is that people who are given a better opportunity, they're giving them more chance of success and excelling than others. And so I think these two things are key.
Justin, let's finish with you. I'd quite like you to just sort of sum up what everybody said, if you'd like to, but also in some of the other seminars, we've talked about how important the different subjects are for people in not just deprived urban areas, but in rural areas around the country, and particularly coastal towns, where there does seem to be a real problem with aspiration, with a lack of opportunity. In terms of open recruitment, how important is that for those type of areas, rather than maybe for the sort of the middle class areas that almost take this sort of thing for granted sometimes?
I think all of this is crucial. Otherwise, you're going to have this disconnect between how hard an education system is working to make sure that young people are coming out with the right skills, the knowledge, maybe some of the experiences, and then there'll be this break between that and them actually being able to take advantage of opportunities that are out there. We've heard a lot of brilliant suggestions and thoughts around the fact that there are actually a lot of solutions. There's a lot of work underway to close some of those gaps on aspiration, to make sure that people have got good advice, good experiences, so they know what they're aiming for. But I think for the rural side of this, the thing we haven't maybe mentioned is that as challenging as COVID has been, actually, if we do move towards a more remote working approach to work, that may mean that for some people who perhaps live more remotely, that's less of a problem than it maybe used to be when they were expected to be in the office 5 days a week. At the same time, it also means that people's home environment, and whether that's fit and okay for them to work in, that then becomes a real issue as well. And so some universities have said to me that some of their graduates have, or their students approaching graduation, have really found it hard doing interviews at home when maybe home is really noisy, there's lots of people there, they don't have private space to do an interview, or if they do, they're worried somebody's about to come through the door. So we're in a different world now, but I think we can actually start to connect up what our educators are doing with what employers want to do, which is to develop that wider talent pool and then make sure that there's that talent connected up with opportunities. The solutions are absolutely out there. The question is making sure there's a real intent to be able to make the most of the talent that we've got.
And that's down to leadership in the end, isn't it? Whether you're running a private sector company or a public sector organisation, a university, school, it all starts at the top. And if the person at the top isn't driving this agenda, there's no one else that is going to. Well, thank you to everyone who's watching. Thanks to the University of Bradford, and thank you to our wonderful panel, Justine Greening, Shirley Congdon, Alex Fleming, Robbie Moore, Steve Kelly, Mike Hawes, and Aleem Bashir. I think that this is is it the 6th or the 7th of these seminars that we've done? They're all available on the Levelling Up Goals website. And of course, there are quite a few to come as well in the future. Look forward to seeing you again. Goodbye.